Hey everyone, and welcome to the Network Effect. I'm Amy Henderson, VP of Client Relations at Channelnomics, and thanks again for tuning in. As you know, each episode we sit down with someone who's shaping the future of partnerships and ecosystems, and today's guest is doing just that. I'm joined by Phil Berry, Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at 360 Insights, a company that's redefining how brands drive partner performance through incentive automation and data intelligence. Today, we're diving into driving partner performance through incentive intelligence, how smarter incentives, better data, and strategic alignment are transforming the channel. So please join me in welcoming Phil Berry. Phil Berry, welcome to the show. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, good, busy, Q4 and lots of fun stuff going on, from a 360 perspective and doing some really cool things outside of that, working with some of the folks at BAPTI and that kind of stuff, which we know. And so it's a fun time right now, especially going into the new year and all the planning that goes on. So, lots of fun.
Well, hey, before we dive into the big stuff, I wanted to start with something fun. And I was just curious to know, you and I have gone back a while. We've known each other for a long time, both kind of, sales, gunslingers, that kind of thing. And now that, you're leading a sales organization, what are some things you've picked up, maybe some skills that might have been unexpected that you've picked up in your time leading sales teams, leading partnerships. What's some things that you've picked up there and some maybe some advice you'd like to share?
Um, well, we won't talk about my curling game because I've recently gone curling with my team about a year ago. We were actually, it wasn't just my team, it was the whole company. We have our like one of our big go-to markets and we all did the Canadian, thing, which was curling, which I was absolutely horrible at, but it was really actually physically demanding. I make fun of it on TV all the time, which I'm, humbled to say how physically demanding it actually is when you're out there. So we won't talk about that. But I think overall, it's just the way that the big thing for me is really, I mean, everybody's talking about AI. So yes, AI, learning how to utilize that within the team and how to use that and for the betterment of, supporting folks, but also, doing the things that I need to do. But I also just think, the younger generation, unfortunately, Amy, I won't speak for you, but I'm getting older, and the younger generation has different motivation strategies, different things that are important to them, and really learning, how to deal with that, how to deal with how they see things. They have a very different way that they look at business, that they look at relationships within business, how people should be spoken to, treated, etc. Is very different than the way that I grew up in the business. So, you really have to pay attention and really understand, what is needed from each individual, especially the folks who are coming up in business and coming up in the world. So
So
it's probably
interesting you
been
said
an eye
that.
opener.
Oh yeah, I was talking over you. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that's probably been an eye opener and something I've been really considered, constantly working on.
Yeah. I mean, I was about to say, I'm so glad that you said that because even with the younger generation, they research things differently and the way that they obtain their data and the way that they want their data to be presented to them is very different from the way, you and I would approach things.
Yeah.
I was at a birthday party last night and we were talking about and they were mainly a mixture of Gen X and some older millennials and this gathering that I was at, and we were talking about that we were the generation that wasn't born into technology, we adapted into technology, where this generation who was born in it does things completely differently, and especially when it comes to AI, they're so turned off by the artificialness of it, for
Mhm.
lack of a better term.
Yeah.
In fact, one person, she was more of a Gen Zer, who I was talking to the other day, she says, if someone sends me an email or text and I see a dash in it, I'm automatically going to ignore you, right? I don't try because I automatically distrust you. So it's very interesting to hear
Yeah.
that, their perspective on things.
It's so true. It's the same thing with, I'm sure you do too. I get 100 cold calls a day. You know what I mean? And I try to pick up a good amount of them just because of sales karma, and I don't want to
Yeah.
upset
Yep.
sales gods. So I try to listen to them. But the second I hear the beep beep and I know that it's a
Yep.
recording, I immediately hang up. You know what I mean? Like I just don't even want to be. I know it's an AI, voice prompt thing, and I don't want to be part of that. But it's also interesting because my daughters, who are 18 and 25, almost 25, um, they are not AI fans. They are like, it ruins the whole humanization of things. You know what I mean? They, and maybe they're my kids truly because I'm a relationship person, but they're
Yeah.
like, you can't have relationships. You can't trust things people are sending you that it's really them. So I think it's actually really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. You want to get a real human on the phone, and I personally, I'll accept a cold call if it's a real human because I want to see how that person's going to perform. Because you and I, we earned our stripes doing cold calls. So if we want to help our fellow sales brethren,
Yeah,
I'll
absolutely.
I'll help
When
them
it,
out. But yeah, if it's a robot, I'm hanging up. I'm not,
yeah.
don't waste my time on that.
And absolutely. And it's one of those things where it's like, if they're good, I want to hear their pitch. And if they're really good, maybe they want to jump ship and come over to 360.
Hey, there you go. Hey, you're always searching for new talent, right? I love it.
Absolutely.
Well, let's shift gears and talk about what the topic that we're talking about today. Driving partner performance through incentive intelligence. And when it comes to incentives, why do you think incentive intelligence is becoming such a critical lever for partner performance today?
Yeah, so like when I think of incentives, it's always been something that's to move behavior, right? And what's changed is it's not so much anymore from a wide open field. It's more about the precision, right? And when I look at things like ecosystems and they're becoming more complex, right? When I think about that, I look at a partner ecosystem and I'm thinking about it is a competitive for a one size fits all approach, right? Guesswork is not going to cut it at all. And really turning those incentives and those growth orchestration tools into something, right? And I really think that incentive intelligence allows people and partners to be profitable, right? And how do you do that when you're looking for the steps to see what's correlating revenue, where generally things are perhaps going wrong, you know what I mean? And then, what are the different elements that allow you for personalization and capabilities to help with the behaviors to get to that target. So I think that's really from a 360. Obviously that's where we're trying to go, but I mean, I think you see it in general within our space, if that makes some sense.
Right. And I also think too that like not every incentive resonates with every partner, with every person. And so again, understanding what incentives talk to a certain type of partner or a certain user, right? What's really going to motivate them to perform with the outcome that you would desire, right, based on those incentives. So yeah,
Yeah,
interesting
that
perspective.
that data, right, in the personalization of that data is really what's going to align you to drive towards those folks, right? Those specific people.
Well, you guys 360, you work with so many industries and a huge wide range.
Yeah.
Where's some of the biggest shifts you've seen in how companies approach partners, incentives, and engagement?
It's interesting because one of the things that we often talk about, right, is the fact that, you know, especially when you go through something like this small little thing we went through a couple of years ago called COVID, there was specific industries that really struggled, right? So, everybody knows, obviously now we're dealing with tariffs, but before, we were dealing with getting things overseas, right? And we were dealing with all that supply chain issue, and we were dealing with obviously the fact that folks weren't leaving the house and certain industries were suffering over others. And I really think that from our perspective, what we've seen is tech has always led, the foreground of technology and new things and accepting new things and doing new things. But we're starting to see now is the different industries follow up behind it, right? So automotive and manufacturing and those types of folks are really starting to do those things where, again, it's not broad, it's really targeted to those specific behaviors, right? So the adoption, doing certification paths, lead submission, right? Or deal reg and that type of stuff. And all of the different types of loyalty and influence you're trying to affect in your partners and distributors, et cetera. That's really happening now. It's been happening tech for a little bit, but now it's starting to happen in automotive and manufacturing. And whether that's a turn of the folks, because obviously, as I mentioned, I'm getting older. A lot of times in automotive and manufacturing, in the past years, there's been, a lot of the older folks who are aging up, and a lot of the younger folks are now starting to come up and implement the ideas that they have and they want to do. So I think that's been one really big thing. The other thing is that what we're seeing is, engagement, right? When we talk about engagement, especially when people are really designed with programs, Amy, they're only doing that engagement during the program. And what we're kind of starting to see is that people are doing it year round because they don't want to lose the audience. So even if they don't have an active promotion that they're running, they're still trying to do that engagement all the time to keep the partners having that experience that, is going to be great for them. Because what do partners want, right? They want to be able to have a good end user experience. They want to get paid quickly. They want to be able to access it easy. So whether that's mobile or anything else. And, they want to understand the program and have transparency to understand the program. Um, and then I think probably the last thing I would say is, obviously data, gamification, another big one, right? The different learning incentives because people do want to enable those pathways to learning and certifications. And then I would say, it's really looking at how people are designing the programs because what the one thing that we're starting to see is people are designing programs to look at things as they're not a cost center. It's actually part of the go-to-market strategy.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, bringing up how you designed the program because it's one thing to have that program and have that enablement mechanism there, but it has to be easy to understand. It has to be easy for the partners to work with, right? I think the number two factors that partners look for in working with a vendor is ease of doing business, ease of a program and the relationship with your account manager. Those are the top two. And I think to your point, the ease of the program, the way that it's developed, and the relationship with the account manager on the ongoing enablement piece year around, I think it's huge, in terms of maintaining and ensuring a partner success. So
The ease of use is so huge, right? Because it's
yeah.
one of those things where it's like partners have multiple different vendors, multiple different programs they're a part of. So the more complicated you make it, the more they're going to forget, the more they're not going to understand it, the more that they're going to gravitate towards something that is super easy to use. As well as obviously, like you mentioned, the relationship they have with their OEM partner is another big thing. But just trying to make the program as simple and as easy to use so you can consistently capture their attention.
In terms of what you're seeing, how brands using data to better understand partner behavior, optimize incentive programs?
Yeah, I mean it's what everybody's really focused on, right? And I mentioned, it's not just a cost center, right? It's really about how to use that data as a way to drive it and create some form of revenue engine from the partners. Um, and I think there's multiple different things that I think go into it that allows them to do, but I think overall, like it obviously it's got to be the backbone of what their strategy is when they're rolling out these programs, right? Because they want to be able to make sure they can understand, what the behavior patterns are, and they want to know who's submitting, and they want to know who's responding to these different programs, whether it's a spiff or, if it's an MDF platform or tool that they're running, they want to know who's growing after that is implemented and all that jazz, right? So, like I think from our perspective, we want to be able to obviously pull together all of that data so that you can see it because we want them to be able to and help them to be able to personalize, those different partner segments. We want to be able to help them show ROI, right? Because if we don't show ROI, then they're not going to ascertain the budget and the spend needed from their leadership in order to keep these programs running. And it also helps them when it comes to predicting any type of issues with their partners or any type of inactivity. And then obviously the other big thing with data that we really talk about and it's one of the big points that we are constantly trying to drive home is when we're looking at the data, the ability to kind of do that A/B testing within program design, right? So if something is working, we try it this way. If it's not working, we try it this way. You know what I mean? We're constantly looking at how do we test that back and forth in small little segments to see what is the way to drive that revenue across the board.
Right. And I love that the concept of looking at the data to, make sure that you're cutting things off at the pass in terms of if there's any lags in performance, if there are, parts about the program, in terms of what the data output is that aren't resonating with some of the partners, and how can you change course with that, and how can you, correct that, to make sure that you can get that partner back on track, is key. Um,
Yeah, because you want to be proactive. You don't want to be reactive, right? Because
exactly.
being reactive costs money. It costs money for
Yeah,
you, it costs money to your partners. And being able to see if something is slightly moving in the wrong direction, you want to be able to correct there before you don't want it to go down that path, right? So really making sure, and I give our team a lot of credit, and they've done a great job. Our program management team, we've got some folks that are really great. And shout out Kelsey Mercer, I love you. She's just one of those great people who runs one of our teams that is constantly just making sure that things don't go off the rails. You know what I mean? And if things are starting to look, like they're going down the wrong path, we correct it beforehand. So, data is just such a massive part of what we do. Hence the renaming of 360 incentives to 360 insights. So.
exactly. Well, speaking of performance, we're hearing a lot about performance happy partners, right? What does that mean to you, and how do you identify and support those partners?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it kind of is a combination of different things, but I think obviously a happy partner is someone who is being engaged with, communicated to on a regular basis, right? For multiple different ways, whether that's enablement or whether that is, you know, ways for them to help them sell from a partnership perspective, to just constantly trying to engage and enable them, right? I think that's the big piece. Um, I think that a happy partner is someone who is profitable, right? So that's really why all these other steps we've talked about really need, you kind of try to hit on those because the profitability piece is obviously gonna make the partner the happiest more than anything else. But I think, like I mentioned earlier, they have to know the program. They have to want to participate in what's happening. They have to want to, keep doing these things because if they're doing them and they're winning, then they're going to lean in. And if they're leaning in, then, you start to really get the momentum. And then, once you get those momentum, you have all these other data points that you can look at to check to see how the momentum is going. Is it going the right way? Right. When we're looking at what a happy partner looks like in a good program, we're looking at things like participation rates, um, time to claim accuracy. We're looking at time to pay, MDF utilization, what's the certification rate, and as those things go up, you can just tell the partner's happy because those things are moving in the right direction, meaning that they're becoming profitable, they're winning, and again, they're driving their people more to do these activities because they're leaning in and winning.
Yeah. I think happy partners make more active partners, right? So if you can find the things that make and keep your partner happy, and it's
Yeah.
funny because we interview so many partners and they say it in different ways, but at the end of the day, they always say the same things. The three things that they need of any vendor to make sure that they stay happy is more transparency, less friction, and better routes to market. That's it. That's all, that's the recipe.
And you hit the nail right on the head, right? Remove the friction and double down on the things that are working, right? And or the things that they're responding to. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. So, so as companies are transforming their programs, their partner programs, what role does incentive strategy play in aligning with the broader business goals from your perspective?
Yeah. I so I think like, the 360 obviously will tell you that incentives are obviously one of the most powerful tools you can have, right? In aligning the broader business goals. Um, I think that you can tell what the partner's goals are, and when you can do that and you can pay them and incentivize them to take those actions and support those behaviors, you're helping them to support those goals. So, if they're shifting from, something in their business is shifting, whether that's an ARR or they're trying to drive adoption or, you know, expanding product or trying to get into the market, right? Incentives can really help the operational part of it really, and be that lever that can help align the partner to those behaviors to 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 ascertain those outcomes, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
no, that makes perfect sense. Well, I kind of wanted to shift it to not more of a negative question, but maybe more of a precautionary questions. What are some common mistakes that you see companies make when designing incentive programs, and what should people, try to avoid?
Yeah, I think the most common mistake probably is just keeping it too broad, too open. I think that it's things become once things become an entitlement program versus some type of behavior growth program. I think you're playing from behind, not only with what your partners are doing because they're not really looking to grow. They know they sell this, they get that. You know what I mean? And that just I think that's really your competitors are starting to do it differently. So I think you need to, I would say that folks need to keep it fresh. They need to keep looking at the programs of how they can change them, how they can, create more engagement. And I think that another thing that we find is that, when a lot of companies will want to do their own marketing and their own comms, which, you know, depending on who you are, can be great. But most of the time, unless you're, a $10 billion business and above, you know, those folks have different goals, and those marketing folks have different goals. They have different responsibilities. So the amount of engagement, communications, and things that go out to the partners sometimes is not at the same level that someone, in a provider like 360 or someone out there like a Spur or someone out there like you guys, and that can constantly be helping to ascertain and bring those folks in constantly. So I think that engagement piece is another huge piece.
It's funny, we always ask the question when folks come to us and they either are building a program from scratch or they're redefining, their indirect go-to-market strategy and trying to figure out the partners that they want to work with. We ask them two questions. What do the partners do that you can't do? And what do the partners do that you don't want to do? And if you can answer those two questions, you can start building that blueprint. And then once you have that blueprint, you can figure out how you need those partners to perform on your behalf and then building that incentive program around those desired business outcomes. And to your point earlier, to say it can't be just an entitlement program, right? You have all these shiny stars, but what do they mean, and how are they improving, your performance in your business? And so that's really sound advice.
Yeah, I mean, I think and I just say, obviously 360, as being the incentive provider, I think our thought, and I think even some of the experts will tell you, right? It's incentives aren't an afterthought. It should definitely be part of your go-to-market strategy.
It's what gets them out of bed.
Yeah,
What motivates them.
yeah,
What gets us out of bed is commission, right? What gets them out of bed? What gets them
yeah,
working for you?
absolutely. Yeah.
So,
And
well,
I think it's going beyond just rebates and MDF, right? It's spiffs,
Yeah.
it's these other types of incentives
Yeah.
that are really moving the needle.
Yeah. Yeah, and that dovetail well into my next question in terms of key performance indicators, right? From a KPI standpoint, what should companies be tracking to measure the success of their incentive strategies or their partner performance?
Yeah, I think, and I know I mentioned a little bit ago, but I think it's looking at the participation rates, right? Looking at what the utilization is of these programs from MDF to the other ones, right? What is your time to claim, right? Because partners want to get paid. They don't want to, if you're paying someone, if someone is create or they've done a certification today and they don't get paid on it to Q2, they get that money and they have no idea where it's come from, right? You have to pay someone or reward them for what they're doing within a timely fashion. So I think, these are the things. What is the quarter over quarter growth based upon, the things that you're deploying? And I think those are the things that you constantly need to look at. And then also, what are your engagement rates? What types of things are you getting from the communications? What type of people are logging in? How long are they in for? Those are all the constant KPIs that we're looking at to identify if a program is working or if it's not working.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, paying partners on time, right? And making sure that they're reaping the benefits of their efforts so they can actually measure their performance based on what they get is huge because if they don't know where their rewards are coming from, they're going to be less motivated, right? So that that makes perfect sense.
100%.
Well, what's next for 360 Insights? What new trends or developments that you guys have coming down the line? Anything that you can share that isn't confidential yet? Any new news?
I think it's more of what we've been doing over the last year or so, right? It's more of moving everything into our ecosystems platform, right? Really trying to have that one platform, right? So there's no multiple different platforms. As you know, 360's done a ton of acquisitions over the last number of years. And I think what we continue to do is take the features and functions of all of those different pieces of software and put them into one single platform, right? And our whole goal is really to give all of our customers the ability to flip a switch, pull a lever whenever they want to, right? And whenever they deem it's necessary. Because whether it's, tariffs or whether it's the economy or an election or whatever, you got to change and you got to adapt. And being able to say, hey, you should do less MDF and more rebates because of XYZ that's happening in the world, and giving them the ability to do that very quickly and easily is really what our focus is. So it's really continuing to do that, and then also just really diving into to how to help these folks run better programs. It's one thing to provide the program, which I think we do really well. And one of the things that I think we do well and we want to consistently get better at is how to help folks to look at their programs and run them better on the 360 software. So that's really what I think is our main focus. And obviously AI is AI. Everybody talks about it. I don't think anybody, unless you're Microsoft, Google, and a couple of select others, really has it nailed down yet. But we do. We're working on our stuff behind the scenes for different AI bots that we're creating.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to see it. So that's going to be amazing. And bringing everything together in a simplified, uniform platform where it's a one-stop shop, I think is gonna be key in terms of enablement and ease of doing business, for your partners and users as well. So I think that's exciting and I can't wait to see it. Well, Phil, thanks so much for spending part of your morning with us here at Channelnomics. And for those tuning in, if you've liked what you've seen here, please like, click, share, watch it over your Thanksgiving meal. But until next time, you guys, thanks for tuning in. And Phil, thank you so much.
Thanks, Amy. Appreciate it.